الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأزواجه وذريته أجمعين. We have been looking at Habermas's critique of Klein's model of argumentation, and we had started looking at his actual criticism, but since it's been a while we looked at this. I'll just go back a bit to remind ourselves what we had already done, and also to keep the continuity. Okay, so I want to know how Klein, and this is Habermas, in his attempt to adopt an external perspective in order to separate clearly de facto from valid argumentation, gets involved in instructive contradictions. That is, we can learn from those contradictions, a la Habermas. Okay, we are starting from here actually. So he, that is Klein, begins by defining the domain of argumentative speech, and this is a quotation from Klein. In every argumentation, there is an attempt to transform something collectively problematic, because you enter into argumentation, and collectively doesn't have to be a universal collective. It can be collective problematic for at least two persons, or even one person against himself, but I think at least two persons is more clear. Because if something is not problematic, you won't enter into an argumentation. There's no need for argumentation if there's not, unless you are just practicing something, or just making up something, etc., or just being facetious. So in argumentation, there's an attempt to transform something collectively problematic into something collectively valid. Geltend in German, by drawing upon what is collectively valid. Okay, let's look at this a bit more closely. So we enter into argumentation only if we disagree on something. And thing we disagree on is what is problematic. As long as that thing is not problematic. So if I say the tree in front of me is green, and if you agree with it, then obviously there's no argumentation. But if you disagree with it, then this claim becomes problematic. And collectively problematic because if there's nobody else then to challenge your claim, then there's no argumentation as well, at least unless you think that you can sort of act as a second person yourself, but you need at least two persons in order to imagine the existence of argumentation. So that is what we mean by collectively problematic. It is something collectively valid. So once a thing has become problematic, argumentation kicks in. And argumentation is a specific way of resolving this problematization. There are other ways, you can use violence, you can use, pragmatic, practical approach, etc. You can use, agreement as the criterion. But in argumentation, what you're looking for is validity. And validity is different from facts. Fact is just that you agree on something, for example. But well, something is valid if you agree on something for good reasons or reasons. That's the difference between validity and facticity, because when we talk about validity, the conception of truth is invoked at certain stage. So something collectively valid when you agree that on certain reasons. So if somebody gives me a reason that why they think that this color is not green, maybe because of the way the sun is shining on the tree, and the actual color is something in between, I don't know. And if I see their point and I agree based on this point, seeing their point, seeing their reason, then this problematic situation or collectively problematic claim is turned into collectively valid. And by drawing upon what is already collectively valid, because we can't give reason and recognize reasons unless we have some background agreement on, consensus on, or taken for granted beliefs on what is reason and what is to give and take reasons, and how a mutual recognition of the validity of reason would look like. For example, if we don't speak same language, we won't be able to enter into argumentation. So a language, or if we don't speak a language at all, and if we are not agreed on the meaning of language, for example. So every argument takes place in the context of already agreed, some basic agreement, because without some basic agreement, you can't have argumentation in an empty background. Okay, so I recognize your reason as a valid reason because I understand what you're saying, because I understand the meaning of reason and claims and raising claims and defending claims, and which type of claims need which type of reasons, etc. So there's a background which I share with you, and that has made possible for us to resolve this issue. So every new issue arises in the context of an agreed upon background and can only be resolved in the context of agreed upon background. Okay, so back to the text. Participants in argumentation want to decide problematic validity claims by adducing reasons, by giving reasons. And in the final analysis, these reasons draw on their power to convince. So what's the difference from a collectively share and problematic knowledge? Okay, so what is the nature of reason? So reason is different from violence, for example. Different from coercion or succumbing to mere authority, because reason had this unique power to convince us. So reason addresses our mind, for example, and a specific faculty in our mind, which is the faculty of conviction, I guess. And reason has this power to convince because it has relation to truth or validity. There's a difference between truth and validity, but I won't go into that in a minute. I won't get into that right now. So I accept something because I recognize it as true or correct or right, depending on what type of reason or what type of claim are involved. But reason work only, as I said, in a context. So background context. So if people don't share certain minimum background context, they won't be able to recognize reasons as reasons, for example, or their power of conviction won't work on them for various reasons. So certain type of reason require only minimum background, like language, just being human, for example. Certain other reason require more thick background, but this background is important. So it is in the context of background that you raise reason, and when you raise reason, there are claims, and when you defend reason, those claim that those are actually positive reason, and when somebody recognize those reason as legitimate, valid reason for that claim, then that produces the power of conviction, and conviction leads to acceptance of your claim, etc., and that leads to agreement, which is not just factual agreement, but so that's what differentiate de facto agreements from validity or valid agreement, because they are de facto agreements are just agreement based on some other reasons or some other, but valid agreements are based on rational reason, so to speak. Rational reason. Now here Habermas's critique actually kicks in. He says Klein's empiricist, and by empiricist he means de facto. Truncation of the sense of argumentation can be seen in how he uses the concept of collectively valid. How he uses the concept of collectively valid. By this, so collectively valid, concept of collectively valid is very important. So we can understand collectively valid in two ways, at least two ways. So collectively valid. So you have a problematic situations, and to resolve it, you enter into argumentation, you raise claim, counterclaim, you give reasons. Now, if those reasons are accepted as merely as fact, as good way to resolve an issue, irrespective of whether they are actually strong reasons or not, then you would say that they are, that agreement or collective resolution of the problem is more factual than valid. But if the problem is resolved because every member in the party is convinced by the strength of the reasons, then that resolution is collectively valid, or rationally collectively valid. Now we don't know whether Habermas is actually being fair to Klein here, because we are not reading Klein's, but we are trying to understand Habermas's point of view. So that's not that important for us. So by this he understands collectively, he understands only those views that are actually shared by that is factually shared by a specific group of specific items times. Screen out all internal relations between what is de facto accepted as a valid and what should have validity in the sense of a claim transcending local, temporal, and social limitation. The valid and the questionable are just relative to person and times. Okay, I think this is going into a bit deeper stuff, so we'll look at it next time, and hopefully this time we'll try to do the next session quite quickly and frequently. Okay, thank you.